Oops. Alrighty, guys. Welcome to a new style of video. The coaches at Clean Strength Fitness are looking to build out a movement library or an exercise library of sorts for our lifters. If anyone else stumbles across these videos, I hope they're helpful. But we're going to be covering everything movement related in terms of powerlifting. A lot of them are going to be accessories. Now, these may be accessories that you guys already have in program, but we commonly see people having trouble with them. Or, and most likely in this situation, it could be accessories that you've never seen before. And we want to make sure you have a deep understanding of how to set them up, how to perform them, and maybe some cues that would be helpful to make sure that we are getting the absolute most out of our accessories. All right, so in this first installment, we're going to be going over the movement you're seeing on screen right now. This is a seated incline bench cable ab crunch, which you could perform this as a crunch by just crunching, or a sit-up, which is the way I like to perform it. And this is to isolate the rectus abdominis. Now, the reason I like this movement so much is it makes it really, really easy to isolate the rectus abdominis. And this is something people have an incredibly hard time doing with more traditional movements. So the big one will be the kneeling cable ab crunch. A lot of people lack the body awareness to perform it correctly, and they run into a bunch of issues. So I'm going to dive into the kneeling cable ab crunch and all the associated issues with that quickly, and then I'll hop back into this variation and talk about all the things that this solves. Alrighty, so before I hop into the kneeling cable ab crunch and the associated issues with it, I need to preface it by saying I'm not trying to demonize this movement by any means. It can be an awesome movement selection, 100%, especially to train the rectus abdominis, if it's performed correctly. The issue is it takes quite a bit of body awareness to perform it correctly and get the stim that we're looking to get from it. All right, so just some basics here. If we're trying to train the rectus abdominis and we're trying to lengthen and shorten the muscle, we need our spine to go through some extension at the top, right? We really want to arch back, right? You need to arch forward a little bit. We're trying to extend backwards. And then we need to curl over significantly. We need a ton of spinal flexion on the way down. Now, the issue a lot of people run into with the kneeling cable ab crunch is they more so just keep their torso in a fixed position. They don't go through much extension at the top of the movement. And then they're not curling over much on the way down, which means, well, we're not getting the stim that we're looking for, right? So I took a video of me kind of performing them poorly to expand on this point, right? So you can see at the top, there's not much extension. And on the way down, there's really not much flexion at all. And the main driver for this, let's call it crunching movement, is not so much of a crunch, is it? It's just my hips moving back and then they're coming forward on the way up and then moving back and then forward on the way up. So what ends up happening is our hip flexors are taking a ton of this load, right? And we're not isolating the rectus abdominis as we're hoping. So let me hop back into the incline bench seated cable ab crunch and explain how that solves all of those issues. First, I'm going to go over the setup of this bad boy, and then we're going to get into the reasoning on why I think this is the absolute best selection for training the rectus abdominis. So to start off, we need something to anchor our feet with. I'm not sure if you guys can see that very well. I just use a little straight bar here. You need a surprising amount of weight on here to anchor you down and stop you from shifting on the bench. Typically, I go anywhere between 80 and 120 pounds. It seems to do the job for me. Next, we need an incline bench. Obviously, it's in the name of the movement. Now, this cable attachment is really nice for this movement. They're very popular. I don't know exactly what it's called, but they're in most gyms that I go to now. If you don't recognize this or you don't have this in your gym, you could also use, well, whatever attachment allows you to get into this position. Cable tricep rope would be fine too. And then obviously we need a cable system. Okay. Another thing in terms of the setup is a lot of people get stressed out trying to figure out, okay, what does the incline of the bench need to be? Where do I set the cable, etc.? The big thing I'll say here is it doesn't matter as much as you think, right? So I'll give you the keys right now. The incline of the bench doesn't matter too much. You can set it to a higher incline, a medium incline like I have here, or a lower incline. It doesn't matter. What does matter is the relation of the incline of the bench to the cable height. So what we're looking for and how you know if you have those two set up well together is the line of pull from the cable system is quite straight all the way through, right? So from the top of the movement to the bottom of the movement, it's quite a linear path. Now, as I'm watching this again, actually, you can see there's a little bit of a downward angle here on the cable. I probably could have set this one notch lower so the line of pull is a little bit more straight. And that would have been perfect. All right, so now let's get into why I love this variation of the cable ab crunch for training the rectus abdominis so much. So as we talked about in the more traditional kneeling cable ab crunch, the major fault with it, if you don't have the proper body awareness to perform them correctly, is the hip flexors end up taking a lot of the load, right? And we're not isolating the rectus abdominis or the intended group of muscles that we're trying to, right? This movement is so good because it adds the right constraints and stability to stop you from moving those hips backwards. We literally have a bench pushing against our butt, which means we are now pivoting off this bench and all that load is going to be thrown onto the intended muscle group here. All right, so now let's talk about how to perform this movement. We have all this stability from the bench, but it doesn't mean it's going to force you to perform this movement correctly. We still need to understand how to do it to get the most out of it. So the first thing is grab the cable before you slide onto the bench. Once you slide on and anchor your feet under the anchor, it's going to be really hard to grab it. So grab the attachment, slide onto the bench, hook your feet under the anchor. Now the starting position looks like, wait till I get into it, like this. So we want to be quite straight through the legs and extremely neutral through the pelvis. Now, like I said, we want to get into some extension at the top of the movement. And just because we're on a bench doesn't mean we can't do it. We arch while we're benching, right? So draw that rib cage up. And this is going to be the initial starting position. Okay. Now, the first action we're looking for is to crunch down, right? So this is going to be quite a shallow movement. We're not going to have a lot of range of motion through this. So pull the rib cage down out of that extended position. Now we're starting to get into some flexion. Once you feel bottomed out and that rib cage is really crushed in, now we're just going to do a sit up all the way through. You can pretty much take this as far as you want, and you are going to get a fantastic stimulus from the top of the movement all the way to the bottom of the movement. I honestly never felt such a good stim for the rectus abdominis than I do with this. I'm feeling it throughout the entirety of the movement. It's awesome. Okay, so first, oops, I just skipped by it quickly. So we get into some extension here, crunch down. Once the crunch is done, then just carry the sit up all the way through. All right, and just quickly before some know-it-all comments and says, hey, well, aren't the hip flexors still working on this variation of the, I can't really call it a cable ab crunch because I'm doing a full sit up, but I'll say this. If you were just to perform the crunching motion, right? Like if we were just trying to keep this as a crunch, then no, the hip flexors are barely working at all. Now, if you're going to carry this through to a full sit up, of course, the hip flexors are going to be taking a little bit of the load, but that's okay. The big thing is we're still isolating the rectus abdominis far better than we were doing the more traditional kneeling cable ab crunch incorrectly, right? So yes, they're working a little bit, but far less than the other option, and that's the goal of this. So yeah, I just needed to get that out of the way before someone made some silly comment about it. Alrighty, and that is it for this video. I hope it proved to be insightful for some of you. If you guys haven't tried this movement before, give it a go. I absolutely love it. And I don't know if when the other coaches are going to be making stuff. I'm going to try to stay somewhat regular with these. But if you guys have any movements that you're having trouble with, leave a comment. Maybe I'll make a video about it. Maybe I won't. It depends how much I like you. All right, see ya.